He emitted no bark, nor did he utter a growl. He merely remained perfectly still, bearing scars and completely mute as the animal shelter ready to terminate his existence, having been categorized as aggressive, beyond redemption, and overlooked. His origins were unknown to all. No individual was willing to make an effort until an individual with a noticeable limp entered, met his gaze directly, and uttered a solitary word. The events that followed rendered everyone in the room motionless. For this canine was not damaged, he was anticipating his arrival, awaiting a voice that had been absent from his life for many years. And the discoveries they make in unison will compel you to reconsider all your preconceived notions about allegiance. The tempest raging outside failed to rival the profound quietude within that concrete corridor. Fluorescent fixtures flickered above kennels constructed of steel bars, each enclosure resonating with a subdued cadence of despair. Yet, at the corridor's distant end, secluded behind multiple layers of isolation, resided the cage that everyone hesitated to approach. Within it stood a German shepherd, not vocalizing, not restlessly moving, but simply observing. Observing with a type of stillness that did not plead for assistance, but rather cautioned against coming any nearer. His fur was irregular in some areas, his right ear bore a significant notch, and a lengthy scar extended beneath one eye, like a silent testament to conflicts no one had inquired about. The personnel did not bestow a name upon him, instead they afforded him distance. They referred to him as the Lost One, a designation he had thoroughly earned. He had been admitted a week prior, discovered alone behind an industrial depot on the periphery of Burlington, Vermont. He possessed no microchip, wore no collar, displayed no inclination for food, and showed no tolerance for physical contact. Anyone venturing too near was met with a baring of teeth. Shelter volunteers exchanged hushed speculations. Perhaps he had fled a dogfighting operation, perhaps he had been trained for aggression, or perhaps he was simply irreparably damaged. One fact was undeniable: his record was marked aggressive, and the duration of his permitted stay was rapidly diminishing. Today marked the final day. Olivia positioned herself outside his enclosure, clutching a small metallic dish. For 2 years, she had dedicated her time as a volunteer at this shelter, witnessing a wide array of cases, from 3-limbed pit bulls to chihuahuas with a single eye. Yet none had unsettled her to the extent this particular dog did. Nevertheless, an inexplicable something about him gnawed at her. He did not behave like the other animals. His aggression did not seem rooted in derangement, it felt like something distinct, like sorrow manifesting as aggression. She lowered herself beside the door and gently slid the dish forward, avoiding any abrupt movements. The dog did not lunge on this occasion. He issued no growl. He did not even cast a glance at the food. He simply continued to stare, not at her, but at the hallway situated behind her. His gaze was fixated on the entrance, as if he were awaiting someone who was tardy, someone who was not destined to arrive. Behind her, the hallway extended, cold and silent, terminating at the front reception where the euthanasia authorization lay folded and signed. The veterinarian had already prepared the syringe. The shelter manager, appearing detached yet weary, delivered a final admonition to Olivia: "Don't venture too close. He's not among those we can save." Yet Olivia found herself unable to depart. She spoke in a hushed tone, her voice scarcely perceptible above the drone of the overhead lighting. "You don't truly wish to be angry, do you?" she inquired. "You simply no longer know whom to trust." The dog blinked. That was the extent of his reaction. No wagging tail, no flinch, merely a slow, deliberate blink, as if that question had been posed to him previously and answered on numerous occasions. The veterinarian entered, consulted the clipboard, and offered a quiet nod. "We'll proceed with this before the midday meal." Olivia paused by the cage, her fingers lightly touching the keys attached to her hip. Still, there was no growl, no snap. The dog simply remained there, statuesque and silent, his gaze still fixed on the hallway, still in a state of waiting. And then, the sound of boots, faint, slow, and gradually growing louder. Olivia pivoted. A man stood at the head of the hallway, moisture dripping from his attire, a folded piece of paper in his grasp, and a distinct limp in his gait. His eyes surveyed the kennels with a quiet, meticulous scrutiny. And for the first time since his arrival, the dog moved, not with ferocity, not with alarm, but with a clear sense of purpose. He advanced one paw, then the other, and waited. Luke Mercer did not present the appearance of a man who casually intruded into places unbidden, nor did he seem like one who would await an invitation. His coat was thoroughly drenched, adhering to a robust physique that moved with a cautious limp. The receptionist blinked twice before managing to speak, primarily because he offered no immediate words. He simply presented a creased slip of paper and stated, "You have a German shepherd with a scar near his right eye. I must see him." The room became still, then the silence fractured with bewilderment. The receptionist wavered, taken aback by his directness, but signaled for Olivia. A few moments later, she emerged, her eyes wide, uncertain whether this was a mere coincidence or something more peculiar. Luke gave a polite nod and trailed her silently down the corridor. As they proceeded past the kennels, most of the dogs barked, leaped, or wagged their tails, all the anticipated behaviors. However, the dog at the very end, that dog became motionless the instant he saw him. His ears pricked, yet he did not growl. He did not expose his teeth. Something in the atmosphere between them palpably shifted. Olivia opened her mouth to articulate, to outline the potential dangers, but Luke had already taken a few deliberate steps toward the cage. The shelter operated under stringent regulations, no direct interaction, no attempts to incite. Luke, however, appeared unconcerned with such policies. He halted just 2 feet from the bars, his gaze locked with the dog's. "Sit, Rep," he commanded, his voice barely a whisper, and the dog obeyed, sitting. It defied logic, no preparatory cues, no encouragement, just immediate, precise compliance. Olivia's breath hitched. The tension that had enveloped that cage for days abruptly dissipated, supplanted by something weightier, more ancient, the kind of gravity that stems not from fear, but from recollection. Luke crouched slightly, his eyes steadfastly fixed on the dog's. "Easy now," he murmured. The dog neither flinched nor barked. His eyes filled with an emotion no one had witnessed in him before, recognition. It was not merely obedience, it was familiarity, not a conditioned reflex, but a personal recollection, the type of connection that cannot be fabricated. "Who are you?" Olivia inquired softly, as if even her voice were reluctant to disturb the moment. Luke did not turn. "Used to work with dogs like this. In another life." The dog slowly edged forward, close to the ground, tail still, ears tilted back. Then, inch by inch, he reached the edge of the kennel gate and licked Luke's fingers. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Olivia stared, blinking as her heart oscillated between reverence and disbelief. Luke finally straightened. "He knows me," he stated, though it did not sound like a triumph, it sounded like grief in a new manifestation. He looked at Olivia and added, "I need to know where you found him." She hesitated. "Behind a warehouse off Riverside Avenue. No tags, no chip, no records at all." Luke glanced back at the dog, now pressed against the bars, monitoring his every move. "And no name?" "None," she confirmed. "We just called him the Lost One." Luke offered the slightest nod. "He was never lost." He stepped back slowly, and the dog's body tensed, not with aggression, but with protest, as if a part of him resisted the moment's end. Olivia opened the clipboard she invariably carried, flipping through papers with trembling fingers. Is this your dog?" she asked. "Legally, I mean." Luke looked down at his boots. "That's what I'm here to find out." And just like that, the delicate tranquility shattered. The air once more filled with quiet inquiries. And somewhere beyond the walls, the clock persisted in its relentless ticking. Luke spoke sparingly following the initial meeting. Yet, the manner in which he remained proximate to the cage, the way the dog's demeanor softened each time he drew nearer, conveyed everything. Olivia also stayed, leaning against the opposing wall, silently observing a connection that somehow felt more ancient than the quietude enveloping them. The shelter now felt different, as though this man's presence had stripped away a layer no one had known was there, as if someone had finally entered the space who comprehended the language this dog had been desperately trying to communicate through silence. One of the junior staff members whispered to the manager, "Are we seriously contemplating allowing this man to interact with him in that manner?" The manager shrugged. "If it affords us more time before the paperwork is finalized, then fine. But don't hold me responsible if someone winds up injured." Inside the enclosure, the dog did not snarl even once. He did not retreat to the far corner as he usually did. He remained by the gate, his eyes following Luke's every motion. Luke pulled up a folding chair, settled down with his elbows on his knees, and after a lengthy pause, remarked, "He wasn't born like this. None of them are. They learn it." Olivia sat beside him, uncertain of what to contribute. Her training involved adhering to protocol, not deciphering an unseen history etched across a dog's very being. But this did not feel like protocol. This felt like something endeavoring to mend itself in slow motion. Luke spoke in a low, steady tone. "The command I employed earlier, it's not civilian, not police, it's tactical." He leaned forward. "I used to work for a private military contractor that trained K9s. We conducted recon. Search and neutralize. High-risk ops. I had a partner. Same build, same eyes. He was caught in a mission that went awry. He did not complete the sentence. It was unnecessary. Olivia could perceive the conclusion in the slump of his shoulders. She glanced toward the vet tech who had been observing from the doorway. Can we scan him again? Look for any deeper identification or old markers. The tech hesitated, then nodded. If he permits us to get close. That was the initial test. Olivia reached for the door latch. The staff members watching flinched, but Luke raised his hand. Let me. He unlatched the door slowly and stepped inside the kennel. The room held its breath. The dog did not lunge, did not snarl. He remained grounded, tense, but alert. As Luke crouched, he issued another quiet command, one intended only for experienced K9s. The dog obeyed, sitting down with perfect precision, awaiting the next instruction. Olivia whispered to the tech, "Did you see that?" He nodded slowly. "That's not shelter training." The dog allowed them to approach. The scanner passed over him. No chip, but there's something else. A small, raised scar near his rib. Almost surgical. The vet leaned in closer. "This appears to be from a shrapnel extraction," he murmured. "Or a field surgery. Whoever performed it was skilled." Luke gently brushed the fur back. "These scars, these are markers. Not all operations are documented. We were ghosts, and so were our dogs." The tech backed away, uncertain whether to categorize this as a miracle or a predicament. Olivia looked up. "So what now? If there's no official ID, the adoption clock continues to tick." Luke did not respond. He looked down at the dog, who had not taken his eyes off him since the moment their gazes met. There was a history in that look. Grief, recognition, trust that was battered but not entirely broken. "He remembers," Luke finally stated. "But until I can prove it, none of this matters." And outside the glass window of the kennel office, the sky over Burlington grew darker as another snowfront approached, mirroring the clock on the wall, which ticked down louder with every passing second. That evening, the storm assailed Burlington with force. Wind battered the shelter windows like an irate inquiry for which no one possessed an answer. Inside, the dog lay curled near the cage door, once again refusing sustenance but keeping his gaze fixed on Luke. Olivia had remained late once more. She stood in the corner of the office, observing Luke sketch something on a notepad, a diagram, a list, perhaps memories only he could interpret. There was a methodical quality to his movements, as if he were not merely recalling but actively connecting disparate pieces. The veterinarian entered silently and handed Luke a photograph, an enhanced image of the scar discovered earlier near the dog's rib. "Examine this closely," he instructed. "This scar has been incised more than once, at least twice. The first incision was clean, likely surgical. The second is cruder, as if someone attempted to obliterate something." Luke adjusted his spectacles. "Or someone attempted to remove something." "What sort of operation were you involved in?" the vet inquired gently. Luke did not reply at once. He tapped the pen on the table. "Classified. Technically, we didn't exist. Our dogs didn't either. No tags, no chips, no records." Olivia spoke up from the side. "Then how did this one end up abandoned in a warehouse lot?" Luke stared at the photograph. "Because someone didn't want him found." The vet continued, "There's something else as well. We found a partial tattoo here." He handed Luke another image. Under UV light, faint digits became visible on the inside of the dog's rear leg. "It's incomplete, faded, looks like it was burned off, but it's not military formatting." Luke studied the digits and a shiver coursed through him. "That's not military. That's private sector. This wasn't just a mission dog. This dog was reassigned." The atmosphere in the room shifted. A new kind of tension now hung in the air, one that carried the scent of a cover-up concealed in fur. Olivia leaned forward. "You're suggesting they didn't just abandon him. They reused him." Luke nodded slowly. "It occurs. Dogs like this, highly trained, loyal, obedient, are sometimes repurposed, contracted out to groups that don't pose too many inquiries. Mercenary organizations, corporate blacklists. And when their utility is exhausted, they vanish." The gravity of that word, vanish, struck Olivia forcefully. She looked towards the dog again, who was now quietly observing them as if he somehow comprehended their conversation. Luke stood. They attempted to erase his past, but they overlooked one crucial detail: dogs don't forget the people who mattered. Olivia asked, "What do we do now?" He didn't blink. "We ascertain who wants him gone." But before either could utter another word, the shelter manager entered, his expression taut. "Luke, look. I understand this situation is complex, but I have policy dictating my actions. If you cannot substantiate ownership by tomorrow morning, the order proceeds." Olivia interjected, "That's unjust." "You witnessed his response. This transcends mere paperwork." "I concur," the manager stated, "but that's not how shelters operate. The dog's file still indicates he's dangerous, and unless we alter that, it's beyond my control." Luke turned back to the dog, who had now risen, standing still again at the bars, his breathing slow and deliberate. "I'll stay tonight," he declared. "In the truck, right outside." The manager raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to." "I do," Luke cut in. That night, the storm engulfed the city. Yet, in the parking lot of a small municipal shelter, a solitary truck sat idling beneath the cold Vermont sky. Inside, a man did not sleep. And in a cage not 20 feet away, a dog listened to the engine's hum as if it were the sole remaining entity in the world worthy of trust. The next morning, something was bound to break. But for the present, two soldiers, one in uniform, one in fur, waited together in silence, clinging to a thread only they remembered how to grasp. At 6:04 a.m., Luke's truck was enveloped in a delicate layer of frost. The heater had ceased functioning long ago, and his breath materialized in the cab like smoke from a fire no one wished to ignite. He had not truly slept, merely gazed through the windshield at the structure across the lot, at the kennel window where a dark form would occasionally rise, circle, and then resettle. Inside the shelter, Olivia arrived early, precariously balancing a coffee in one hand and a palpable sense of anxiety in the other. She proceeded past the front desk without a word, heading directly to the cage. The dog was awake, alert, however, instead of pacing or growling, he sat observing the door, waiting. Luke entered moments later, stiff from the cold, yet focused. "Did anyone call?" he inquired. Olivia shook her head. "Nothing yet. I've checked every veterinarian, shelter, and trainer database from here to Maine. No match." "I have one more contact," Luke muttered, "but he won't speak on the record. He used to handle security contracts on the side." Before Olivia could pose a question, the shelter manager materialized, clutching a file. "We're out of time," he stated. "Either someone signs adoption paperwork this morning, or we proceed. And we cannot simply release a potentially aggressive dog to someone lacking ownership documents." Luke's jaw tensed. "You saw him with me. You all witnessed it. And that's insufficient for the city," the manager retorted. "I have to follow through. There's already a vet on standby." As if on cue, the door buzzed. The receptionist leaned in. "You'll want to hear this," she said quietly. Some man called, inquiring about a scarred shepherd with a military posture. Refused to leave a name. Luke and Olivia exchanged glances. "That's not coincidental," Luke observed. The manager frowned. "You believe someone is looking for this dog?" "No," Luke stated flatly. "I believe someone is attempting to ensure no one finds him." Olivia's voice quavered. "What do you mean?" Luke took a breath. "If he was reassigned after my unit, if someone utilized him off the books, then whoever was responsible likely wants him gone, erased. And if I'm correct, they already know he's here." The room froze. Outside, the wind howled through the parking lot, causing a loose sign to slam against the side of the building like an ill omen. Olivia whispered, "You think they're coming?" Luke did not reply. Instead, he moved toward the cage, crouched down, and uttered a single word, "Guard." The dog instantly snapped to attention, not in fear, but in position, back straight, ears forward, silent. Then he moved to the cage door and stood between Luke and the hallway, staring out like a sentinel. "He remembers his job," Luke said quietly. "But who's the enemy?" Olivia asked. Luke turned toward the window, his voice low. "That's what I intend to find out. But if I don't return today, don't let them near him." And with that, he departed, vanishing into the white exhalation of a cold Vermont morning. What none of them observed was the black SUV already stationed 2 blocks away, engine idling, and the man inside perusing a folder labeled with a number, not a name. The door rattled violently before it swung open. Olivia looked up from her clipboard just in time to witness a tall man in a black overcoat step across the threshold as if he already held dominion over the building. His shoes produced no sound. His voice, calm and clipped, resonated too far for its subdued volume. "I'm here for the shepherd." The receptionist blinked. "Are you from animal control?" The man smiled. "Not precisely. I represent a canine rehabilitation program, special division. We manage dogs with advanced behavioral trauma, ex-military, ex-law enforcement. I understand you have one in isolation." Olivia moved in rapidly, her heart already pounding. There's no appointment on file and no such program has contacted us. He tilted his head slightly. You're Olivia? She froze. How do you know my name? But before the question could fully form, Luke reappeared behind her as if he had been anticipating that exact moment. He took one look at the man and positioned himself between them. You'll need to show identification. The man produced a card. No agency name, no official seal, just a name, a barcode, and a number. Luke didn't even feign to read it. This is a municipal shelter, Luke stated. You can't take anything without authorization. I'm not taking him, the man replied evenly. Merely assessing. He's not a file, Luke snapped. A pause. Then the man smiled, this time with less charm and more of a warning. You were there, weren't you? The Kandahar drop zone. The mission that didn't make the report. Luke didn't blink. And you weren't supposed to exist. Olivia's skin tingled as the pieces began to fall into place in her mind. Whoever this man was, he possessed too much knowledge, moved with excessive confidence, and spoke as if secrets were his stock in trade. The man shifted his gaze toward the back hallway. Dogs like him aren't meant to be left unsupervised. They carry things, responses, memories. He's not a weapon, Olivia asserted. He was trained to be, the man countered. And you don't just deactivate that. Luke's voice cut through the tension. Leave. The man looked at him one final time. You don't know what he's remembering or what he was utilized for. And if someone else discovers this, you won't receive a second warning. He departed with no further explanation, slipping back into the storm like a shadow that wished to remain untraced. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Luke walked back to the cage. The dog was standing, pacing, agitated. Luke crouched, calm, but steady. Easy, he whispered. Easy now. He hesitated, then tried a word he hadn't uttered in years. A name, not a command, a whisper laden with memory. Echo. The dog stopped. His ears twitched, his body froze. Then he turned slowly and walked to Luke. Saturday. He pressed his head into the man's chest and released a low, trembling breath that wasn't a growl. It was relief. Olivia gasped. Echo. Luke nodded. He was always quiet. Never barked unless I was in danger. That's how I knew him. That's how I trained him. She knelt beside them. Why didn't he respond before? Because no one had called him by his real name. Echo didn't move. He just kept leaning against Luke the way people do when they're struggling to maintain composure. Luke stared at the wall, his voice lower than before. They thought they erased him, but you can't delete loyalty. In the corner of the room, the fax machine suddenly whirred to life. A single page printed out, devoid of a header or sender ID, bearing only a message. Dog ID Echo 17 / status classified / retrieval scheduled. And beneath it, a timestamp, tomorrow 9 a.m. Morning at the shelter commenced with frost etching the windows and an unusual silence pervading the halls. No barking, no clatter of bowls, just the kind of quiet that feels deliberately orchestrated, as if everything senses an impending event. Olivia arrived early, still clutching the fax from the previous night as if it possessed physical weight. The words retrieval scheduled burned into her consciousness. She had barely slept, her phone buzzing with news alerts she ignored. Echo's name replayed in her mind like a relentless metronome. She proceeded directly to his kennel. Echo was awake, standing, alert, his posture sharp. He had not eaten, but neither was he pacing. He was guarding. He remained oriented towards the hallway, his ears angled to catch every sound, waiting, anticipating. At 8:02 a.m., the shelter manager unlocked the medication cabinet. Don't, Olivia interjected, positioning herself between him and the counter. I have to, he replied. City regulations, you know that. Then disregard them, she snapped. He sighed. I saw the facts too, and you genuinely believe this concludes with a quiet rescue mission. Whoever dispatched that page, this isn't about a dog. It concerns something Echo was involved in, something no one wants exposed. And that's a justification to kill him? She demanded, her voice trembling. It's a reason not to be caught in the middle when it all unravels. Luke arrived 15 minutes later, moving swiftly. No limp, no hesitation. He carried a worn manila folder and a small drive in his coat. "We have one chance," he stated, sliding the folder onto the desk. "There's a journalist, independent. Won't touch anything with military connections. But if I can prove this dog was abandoned after a classified operation, and he's being tracked, not rescued, this story becomes public. Names, companies, consequences." The shelter manager didn't glance at the file. "And if they arrive before then?" Luke turned toward the door. "Then we hold." But the word had scarcely settled in the air when the sound of tires crunching on gravel froze everyone in place. A black SUV rolled into the lot, followed by another. Two men exited the lead vehicle dressed in plain black suits. No insignia, no expressions. They didn't knock. They simply walked straight to the door as if permission were not theirs to seek. "We need the dog," one of them said calmly, as if requesting a pen. Immediately, Olivia stepped forward. "He's under evaluation." That concluded at 9 a.m., the man replied. "He's the property of a federal subcontractor with authorization." "Authorization from whom?" Luke asked. The man produced a sealed document with a blurred-out signature and a numerical string. Luke read it and let out a single, humorless laugh. "This isn't even genuine clearance. It's a paper trail designed to disappear." "Step aside," the second man ordered. Echo was now growling, low, deep, primal, not barking, not panicking, but warning. Luke moved to the kennel, placed a hand on the latch, and spoke again. "Echo, hold." The dog froze, focused. His breathing slowed, but his eyes never left the men. "You sure about this?" Olivia whispered. Luke didn't take his eyes off Echo. "If they take him, he won't come back." The men began advancing, slow and certain. Echo backed up, then took a single step forward, guard posture returning, shoulders stiff. "Easy, Echo," Luke said softly. "Stand down." But Echo didn't. Instead, he stepped in front of Luke and stayed there, between him and the men, chest forward, ears pinned, silent. The lead man shifted, unsettled. This dog was decommissioned. Then why is he still protecting his handler? Luke replied. Nobody moved. The moment fractured when Olivia, still holding the facts, raised her phone. She pressed record and declared loudly and clearly, "This is Echo, former military K9, being reclaimed without clear authorization. Everything you say and do is being documented and will be shared." That was the boundary. The men paused. Echo didn't. He stepped closer, not to attack, but to make a choice. Luke dropped to one knee, whispered the old, final command, the one they only employed at the conclusion of mission routes. Echo sat, tail still, eyes locked, but the loyalty, it was no longer classified. For a second, everything stood motionless, as if the shelter itself were holding its breath. Echo didn't growl, didn't move. He simply remained positioned between Luke and the strangers, his body quiet but tensed. A silent message no one dared to misinterpret. The two men, proficient in intimidation, were the first to break eye contact. One lowered his gaze, the other took a cautious step backward. But it was not yet concluded. The manager cleared his throat, audibly shaken. I cannot authorize a transfer. Not under duress. Not without due process." The lead man stiffened. "Then prepare for legal repercussions." "You're welcome to file whatever you wish," Olivia interjected, stepping forward, her phone still recording. "But this entire exchange, this forced retrieval, the unnamed agency, the absence of a warrant, it's already been transmitted to a press contact. So, proceed. Let's see who files first." There was a pause. Then the two men turned and departed. No final words, no parting glance, just a silent exit into the cold. As the door closed behind them, Luke finally exhaled. He crouched beside Echo, who slowly turned and sat, facing his handler as if no time had elapsed between missions. Luke scratched behind his ear. "You did good," he murmured. "You always did." The room was still thick with tension, but it was now dissipating, thread by thread. The shelter staff emerged from behind desks and from around corners, expressions of disbelief etched on their faces. One volunteer whispered he chose him. That dog chose him. The manager slowly approached. "I'll sign the release papers, but you need to get him out today. You understand?" Luke nodded. "We're already gone." By late afternoon, the sky over Burlington fractured just enough for the sun to penetrate. Snow melted in slow drips from the shelter's eaves. Luke stepped out the front door, Echo trotting faithfully at his side. Not with the rigid nervousness of a dog under command, but with the quiet grace of one who had rediscovered his purpose. Olivia followed them out. handing Luke a packet containing echo scans, vet notes, and a flash drive with every second of recorded footage. "You think this will protect him?" she asked. "No," Luke said, "but it'll make them hesitate." They loaded into the truck, Echo hopping into the passenger seat as if he'd never forgotten it was his. Luke looked back once at the building, at Olivia, at the life they were leaving behind. "Thanks for seeing what others didn't." She nodded. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere no one says classified," he replied. "Somewhere he can just be a dog." Then the engine turned over, and the tires crunched over snow and gravel as they pulled away. Days later, the video footage surfaced online. It disseminated more rapidly than anticipated, picked up by military oversight groups, animal rights advocates, and journalists unafraid to pose challenging questions. The word Echo began trending alongside hashtags like #LoyaltyUnleashed and #InvisibleHeroes. But Luke didn't watch it. In a cabin nestled beside a frozen lake upstate, Luke built a small fire while Echo slept nearby, curled into a bed fashioned from old jackets and worn fleece. Every now and then, he'd twitch in his sleep, his muscles recalling places no dog should have ever experienced. But when he awoke and Luke was still there, he'd relax again. Because this time, the mission wasn't about following commands or confronting enemies. This time, the mission was simply healing. And Echo, he was finally